This one document will almost guarantee that you pass your check ride on the first attempt.
Clear.
So if you're watching this video, chances are you have a check ride coming up. And with that, you're probably pretty nervous and you want to pass that check ride on the first try. So today we're going to talk about the document that really is going to get you to pass that check ride first try without any surprises. And that document is going to be called the Airman Certification Standards. All right, so to go to the ACS, we just search for it in Google, Airman Certification Standards. And up at the top, you'll see the FAA website, Airman Certification Standards. And then from here, the FAA gives you a list of all of the different Airman Certification Standards there are for the different certificates and ratings that you can achieve. So for today, we're going to focus on the Private Pilot Airplane, ACS, since most of you probably have not taken a check ride before. And so the Airman Certification Standards is your check ride. It is the certification standards given from the FAA. It lays out every bit of content that you need to know in order to be determined that you are a safe pilot. And so starting here, if you just went through what I did to get to this document, going through the FAA website, you should get linked to the most up-to-date ACS. So this one is went into effect of November 2023. It's FAA-S-ACS-6 Charlie. At the very beginning of the ACS, we are going to be talking about just the recent changes that were made within the previous versions. So going from previous versions to this, so there's like a little log there, and then here's all of the codes that have been added. We'll talk about these codes in just a second. But yeah, so there's that forward front matter of the ACS. From there, we have the table of contents. And here we can get a pretty good breakdown as how the check ride is going to be performed. So we have the area of operations, and then within the area of operations, we have different tasks. And so we have Area Operation 1, Pre-Flight Preparation, Task A, Pilot Qualifications. So for the private pilot check ride, the bulk of your oral the oral exam will be through this Area of Operation 1. Certain things, maybe like the pre-flight assessment, that could all fall under the ground stuff as well. However, the rest of this is all going to be the flight portion of your check ride. So within each task, if I just click on one of them, it'll link us to the first page here. So we have Area Operation 1, Pre-Flight Procedures, Task A, Pilot Qualifications. Right up at the top is a thing called References. This whole list of references is going to be the documents from the FAA. So these are free resources from the FAA. These are going to be your handbooks, the regulations, advisory circulars, those type of things. Those are the references used to determine essentially the content that you're being tested on. So in the topic of pilot qualifications specifically, we come down here to our first knowledge area. There's certification requirements, recent flight experience, and record keeping. Okay, so we got some currency things that we're talking about. What are your overall eligibility requirements to get your private pilot certificate? Well, if we go to the references, we got Part 61. Part 61 is going to be your certification of airmen, and it's going to highlight all of the eligibility requirements. And so if you're ever going through the ACS and you find a topic on there that you're not very familiar with and you want to go study up on, go to the references section and try to find the information from the FAA, because that's ultimately what you're going to be tested on. Below the references, we have the objective. So the objective is going to cover just what is the goal of that task. What is the goal of that task? And so in this case, for pilot qualifications, to determine the applicant exhibits satisfactory knowledge, risk management, and skills associated with airman and medical certificates, including privileges, limitations, currency, and operating as pilot in command. And operating as pilot in command as a private pilot. So then from there, we go and talk about the knowledge areas. So the knowledge section is, of course, the knowledge that you need to have going into your CHECKRIDE, and it lists out each topic that you need to know. We already looked at the first one. Our second one here is our privileges and limitations. Knowledge area 3 is your medical certificates, class expiration, privileges, temporary disqualifications, that type of thing. And then from there, below the knowledge section, we have the risk management section. The risk management section is going to have to do with your decision making and your ability to identify, assess, and mitigate risks. So we look here, and risk management area 1, proficiency versus currency. What is the difference between the two? Skills is the things that you have to perform on a CHECKRIDE. So in this case, for task A, you have to apply the requirements to act as pilot in command under VFR in a scenario given by the evaluator. So when you go into your CHECKRIDE, you've already been briefed, usually via email or phone call from your examiner, and they give you the scenario. They're saying, hey, you're going to do this flight from point A to point B. You're taking these people. Here's the weights of the baggage. Here's the reason we're going. And they're trying to build this scenario. And so your whole CHECKRIDE is going to be centered around that scenario. So now, going through here, you can see that there's a lot of knowledge areas, there's a lot of risk areas, a lot of skills areas that need to be covered within each task. That being said, you're not going to get tested on every single item in there. If you did that, you would not ever finish the CHECKRIDE in one day, in one sitting, let alone. So the FAA instead has you tested on one knowledge area, one risk area, and all skills. There are certain exceptions to that, like if we go to task C here, there's notes up at the top, and it says if knowledge area 2 is selected, the evaluator must assess the applicant's knowledge of at least 3 sub-elements. And so let's take a look at knowledge area 2. That's the acceptable weather products and resources required for pre-flight planning, current and forecast weather for departure, en route, and arrival phases of flight, such as, and then it gives you your airport observations, your METAR, species, pilot observations, your surface analysis chart, terminal aerodrome forecasts, graphical forecast for aviation. So you only have to go through 3 of these as a bare minimum on the CHECKRIDE. Now, your examiner has discretion to test whatever additional content they want, as to show that you are truly you've truly mastered that specific task. So in addition to all of that, on your written exam, your knowledge test report will have a note for all of the missed questions on your test. It's not going to give you the questions themselves, but it is the ACS code that gives you the topic that you missed. So, for example, if I was taking my written exam and I messed up reading a surface analysis chart, I got that answer wrong, then this code, PA.1.C.K2B, would show up on my knowledge test report. And so that means I will be guaranteed to talk about surface analysis charts on my CHECKRIDE. So anything you miss on the written exam has to come up on your CHECKRIDE. And that's just a verification that, hey, we made some mistakes in our testing earlier. Have we gone through and learned what we made mistakes on? Have we gone through and studied that topic a little bit more? And so the FAA does that to ensure that you are truly mastering these various topics. So you go through the ACS, you get to the different area of operations. Now we start getting the pre-flight procedures, talking about a pilot self-assessment. So you're doing your I'm safe, that type of stuff. And then you start going through the next area of operations where your actual flight portion really begins. You're starting to do things like traffic patterns. And so with the parts of the flight, there are, of course, the skill elements. All skill elements need to be covered. You need to make sure you're very familiar with each one of these, because if you don't satisfy the requirements for the ACS per these skill requirements, then you're going to fail your check ride. So there's going to be certain things like your maneuvers. So there's steep turns. So area of operation 5, task A, steep turns. So throughout the check ride, even in the flight portion, you're still going to get asked some questions orally. The oral exam never really ends throughout the whole check ride. But when it comes to the actual flight portion, now the skills section here highlights the exact standards that you're going to be held to on your maneuvers. So for example, on the steep turns, you need to roll into a 360-degree steep turn with approximately 45 degrees of bank. Scale area 5 here says you maintain the entry altitude plus or minus 100 feet, airspeed plus or minus 10 knots, and bank angle plus or minus 5 degrees. You roll out on the entry heading within plus or minus 10 degrees. So those are the tolerances of the maneuver. If you fall outside of those tolerances, you don't necessarily fail the whole maneuver. However, if you're continuing to deviate, you're not making corrections, those type of things, then yeah, that maneuver is not going to be satisfactory. Now, if you're doing your steep turns and it's a really bumpy day and you get blown up to 110 feet and you come back down, you make a proper correction, you come back down on your altitude and you get back into that level steep turn, chances are you're probably not going to fail the check ride. But at that point, it's kind of up to the examiner's determination. So there's going to be certain elements of the airman certification standards that don't apply to you. And it all depends on what type of rating you're trying to get with your check ride. For the most part, most of you are going to be getting your airplane single engine land rating onto your private pilot certificate. And so with that, you're going to not necessarily worry about any of the water or seaplane operation stuff. So anything that says single engine C or multi-engine C, you don't have to worry about those. You're not going to be testing those for a land-based aircraft check ride. Then there's also certain maneuvers and stuff that are going to be for multi-engine airplane. If you are flying a single engine airplane, the multi-engine stuff is not necessarily going to apply to you. Engine failure after takeoff. So a simulated engine failure after takeoff, that's something that you're going to have to do on your multi-engine check ride. Now, if you're taking your private pilot for the very first time and you're doing that in a multi-engine airplane, then yes, anything that's multi-engine, you're going to have to do. So, yeah, you have to approach this document within the context of your check ride. What aircraft are you trying to fly? What rating are you trying to get with it? And then additionally, at the very end of the ACS, so once you get past section 12 here for the post-flight procedures, now we're going to get to the appendix. And the appendices within the ACS is going to be a very good resource. It really gives you the layout of how the check ride is going to be performed, and gives you a little bit more insight as to all the little details around it. So for example, eligibility requirements, private pilot certificate. Here it's citing the exact regulations that specify what are your eligibility requirements for the private pilot certificate. Then here, private pilot airman knowledge test table. So this is telling you which knowledge test applies to that private pilot airplane ACS. And that is going to be the PAR. That's the test code. So your knowledge test report should say PAR for the code of the test, and that's your private pilot airplane written exam. It's a 60-question test. You need to be at least 15 years old to take the knowledge test. And, excuse me, and then you also have 2.5 hours to complete the test, and you need at least a 70% to pass. But again, going back to what we said earlier, any question you get marked incorrect on that knowledge test, the topic comes back up on your CHECKRIDE. So although the minimum is 70% for passing, shoot for the higher percentages, shoot for those 90s, maybe even upper 90s if you're really worried about it. By doing so, you're going to limit how many questions you actually have to go back over on your CHECKRIDE. Going back to what we were talking about with the code. So the code is listed here, and here's the breakdown. So PA is going to be the applicable ACS. So if you're doing your private pilot airplane, every single code within this specific document is going to say PA. If you're getting your commercial pilot certificate, it's a different code for the commercial pilot ACS. But for you taking your private pilot airplane, everything should be PA. And then the next is the Roman numeral for the area of operation. Then you have the task, and then the knowledge, risk, or skill element. So PA 1C K2, private pilot airplane, area of operation 1, task Charlie, knowledge area 2. And so if you had your written exam and you saw that code come up, we can go and take a look. What is PA 1 Charlie 2? We come back up to the top here. One Charlie. Oh, is this the weather again? It is. Yep. So Charlie 2 or K2. So this is the weather one that we just looked at earlier. So if you saw that code, you would come back through here and make sure you're brushed up on all of that content there. So then from there we have the combined private instrument test. So you can also get your instrument rating at the same time. Very rare do people actually do this. Very rare do instructors let students do this. So yeah, maybe if you're part of some program, training program out there, then maybe they have this private instrument combined test. This is just giving you the guidance on how that's performed, since the private pilot CHECKRIDE is a strictly VFR CHECKRIDE, but then the instrument rating CHECKRIDE is strictly IFR CHECKRIDE. Next section here is your instructor's responsibilities. They're essentially saying that we've flown together, I've determined that you meet the standards within the ACS, and I determined that you are proficient enough to have the certificate which you're seeking. The evaluator is going to be the person who is getting that second opinion and ensuring that you do truly meet those standards. And the evaluator comes in various different forms, but for the most part, people use designated pilot examiners, or DPEs. And so those are going to be the people performing the actual test for you, proctoring the test, and evaluating your performance. There's 3 possible outcomes for the test. So you have a satisfactory completion of the CHECKRIDE. You'll receive a temporary airman certificate, as the FAA makes the plastic card. Just like your student pilot certificate, you'll start with the temporary, and then after 120 days or so, you should receive a plastic card in the mail from the FAA. If you did not pass the CHECKRIDE, you will receive a notice of disapproval. That notice of disapproval basically is going to highlight the areas that you did not meet the standards on, but it also is going to tell you the areas that you did meet the standards on. And so from there, you have 60 days to retest, and specifically retest the areas which you did not meet the standards on. If you needed to stop the CHECKRIDE at any point, you have the ability to do so. you will receive a letter of discontinuance. And more than likely, this will probably be like a weather issue. So when you take your check ride, you go through the oral, you're looking forward to flying, and then all of a sudden you do your weather brief for the flight, and you're like, ooh, these conditions are a little outside my personal minimums. I'd like to discontinue. And so at that point, you receive that letter of discontinuance. Much like the notice of disapproval, it just tells you the areas that you have completed and were satisfied with, and then it says the areas that you still need to do. And you have, again, 60 days to finish out the test. And so here again is just the little bit more details within each one of those three possible outcomes. And then we have our additional ratings tables. So again, most of you watching this video are probably going to be taking your private pilot airplane check ride for single engine land, airplane single engine land. And so if that's the case, maybe one day you decide you want to get your private pilot multi-engine land rating, or single engine C, or multi-engine C, whatever. And so if that's the case, you need to come down to this table and you need to say, okay, what am I trying to get? I'm trying to get my multi-engine. So I need to find addition of an airplane multi-engine land. Okay, so then we come back down here. Well, what private pilot certificate do you already hold? Well, I already have my airplane single engine land. So then I come down here, and this tells me the area of operations and the tasks that I have to complete for the check ride of the additional rating. So you're not having to redo the entire private pilot check ride again. Now you're just going to get tested on the specific things for that aircraft rating. Once we get through those tables, we get to Appendix 2, and we're talking about some emphasis areas. So in these safety of flight areas, we have stall spin awareness. You should not be stalling or spinning the airplane unintentionally. While you're performing stalls, yes, you're going to get into the full brake and everything. You're going to make your recoveries. Those are the only times that the airplane should be stalling. If you're in the traffic pattern and the stall horn's blaring, that's going to be a red flag about your piloting proficiency, because that's showing that you might not be aware of your stall spin situations. Use of checklists is a non-negotiable. You have to use your checklists throughout the entire flight, from startup to shutdown, pre-flight preparations, all that, or pre-flight inspection, everything. There's going to be various times where you need to hand off the flight controls to your examiner. The examiner is, for example, when you're going to do your simulated instrument time, the examiner is going to take controls, and so you're going to utilize those positive exchange of flight controls. It's important that you brief those positive exchange of flight controls so that everybody's on the same page, and that's something that you'll just carry on through the rest of your flying career. Use of distractions. This is something that your instructor should already kind of start working in with you. The flying environment is very distracting. You have traffic around you. You got passengers in the back that are not pilots. They don't know what's going on. And so all these distractions can add up and change the safety of flight. And so it's up to you to handle those distractions, mitigate any risks associated with those distractions. And so the use of distractions here is basically saying occasionally the examiner will potentially throw in some sort of distractions to kind of test your overall your aeronautical decision making, which is the next section here. And so with the risk elements, the skills, everything like that, you're going to be tested on your aeronautical decision making, your single pilot resource management, crew resource management if it applies. And then there's a little section here talking about multi-engine considerations and then single engine considerations. For example, for safety reasons, the evaluator will not request a simulated power plant failure in a single engine airplane unless it is possible to safely complete a landing. So basically the examiner is not going to fail your engine when there's no possible way of finding a safe landing field. That being said, your engine will fail simulated at some point in your check ride. That's one of the tasks in the ACS. Appendix 3 has to deal with the actual aircraft limitations and equipment. Basically, you need to bring an airworthy airplane, and that airplane needs to satisfy the requirements of the ACS. So, for example, this is kind of a common issue for CFI applicants. The CFI ACS specifies that the airplane you bring needs to be spin capable, because you have to do spins on the CHECKRIDE, assuming you don't have a endorsement saying that you did spin training with an instructor. And so in that CHECKRIDE, you would then have to perform spins with that examiner, and you need to be in a spin capable airplane to do so. Well, not every airplane is approved to spin, so you can't just bring one of those airplanes to your CHECKRIDE. So the next section here is going to be our operational requirements, limitations, and task information. So, like I said earlier, just because you momentarily deviate from a standard in a maneuver, that does not mean you're going to actually fail the CHECKRIDE. So if we look here, they actually give a specific allowance here for slow flight. For environmental factors like turbulence may result in a momentary activation of the stall warning indicators. If that happens, if the turbulence is bad that day and you do have the stall warning horn go off during slow flight, it's not the end of the world. Just try to fly the airplane a little bit faster. Make those corrections. As long as you're making those corrections and you're addressing that you're out of standards and that you're correcting for it, then the CHECKRIDE will go smoothly and you'll still have met the standard, basically. Now, if you're continuing to deviate, if that stall horn keeps chirping and you're not making those corrections, then yeah, that might be an issue, and you might fail that maneuver. And then, yeah, so this is just going through individual tasks and giving some very specific allowances. And so there you have it. That is the Airman Certification Standards. I know we didn't go through bullet by bullet, line by line of all of the different items. I'm just going to let that up to you, because after all, your studies are going to be what determines whether or not you pass or fail a CHECKRIDE. So you need to go through the ACS yourself to actually get that full knowledge, whereas someone like me just kind of feeding it all to you might not be the most beneficial way. It might get the content across quickly, but you're not interacting with it. If you're curious about more on how I actually like to personally go about studying and learning the various topics, there's going to be a link in one of the corners there for the card for the video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And with that, we'll see you in the next video.
Clear.